Privileged to introduce Dr. Gideon Golany, the distinguished author and research professor of urban design and planning from Pennsylvania State University. When I spoke to Dr. Golany 3 weeks ago to help arrange his visit here, it was for me something of a reunion with a colleague of long standing. We were both lecturers at the Faculty of Architecture and Town Planning at the Haifa Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. I remember how his work and his selection of subjects brought a new light and fresh insights to the approaches of design and planning. He was and always has been a pioneer in the real sense of the word in creative inquiry. His works were exemplars of qualitative research, and we saw then the enormous productivity he was capable of. It is, therefore, no surprise to me that in the last 21 years since we last met, Dr. Golany has written many books, all of which received top reviews. My count so far, and I may be wrong, Gideon, is 18 books for the international milieu. One has been translated into Chinese, and he has 5 books in progress, which I'll come to in a moment. He is also the author of 27 monographs and a contributor to 14 books by other authors and monographs by other authors, and has made keynote addresses and presented papers at no less than over 20 international conferences. His areas of speciality are in earth-sheltered habitat, planning for arid zones, and new town planning, design and principles. His books relate to these titles. What I'd like to do here is to refer a reference by Louis Mumford on his book, New Town Planning Principles and Practice, just for the record. This is the cover, written on the cover of the book, which most librarians tear off. We went in the library today and found that they took the book cover off, but often one wants to learn about the author. This is what Louis Mumford had to say about his book. Professor Golany's work opens a new phase in the ecology and sociology of planning, drawing on the large store of actual experience now in new town building. Golany has made a critical appraisal of every phase of new town planning and construction. This many-sided study stands in a class by itself alongside Ian McHarg's Planning with Nature, a basic text not merely for professional town planners and administrators, but for every citizen concerned with laying new foundations for a humane, life-centered culture. That's indeed a very important review by Louis Mumford. His 5 new books, and what I want to do is to mention his 5 new books because they're in the oven at the moment and in various stages of completion. These are the titles. Evolution of Urban Design in History. This is a magnum opus of a work that Gideon was describing to us yesterday, and probably will run into several volumes. It's a work that he tells me he's very excited about. And that's vintage Golany, to be excited about his work. Chinese New Town Planning and Design. This is another book. Urban Design of Ancient Chinese Cities. This is the recent period of Golany since 1984. Urban Design Principles in Arid Zones. He's written several books on that already. And Image of the City in the Bible, which sounds a most fascinating study. He was telling us that he brought over people to look at every page of the Bible to see the attitude towards urban environments and the attitude towards rural environments. And this should be really a fascinating study. I believe already he's worked on it for over 3.5 months in just studying the Bible. Further, Dr. Golany received his PhD at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in 1966, and there he also received his Master of Arts and Bachelor of Arts degrees. He received his Master of Science in Environmental Development at the Technion with distinction in thesis. He is currently Research Professor of Urban Design at Pennsylvania State University. He has taught as Associate Professor at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and as a lecturer at Cornell University, all for substantial times, as well as, of course, the Haifa Technion I mentioned earlier. He has a consulting design and planning firm, Golany and Associates, and has worked for the Architectural Scientific Academy on projects in Shanxi Province, China, the UN Center for Human Settlements, the Ministry of Interior in Jerusalem on Muslim and Christian Arab communities, and for the Jewish Agency on kibbutz settlements. His awards include, and I'm only including some of these, there are many others, a Fulbright Research Award for Japan, 87-88, a Fulbright Teaching Award for Turkey, 86, a Fulbright Award for India, 82. His honors include the International Book of Honor, Who's Who in America, Who's Who in the East, Community Leaders and Noteworthy Americans, Dictionary of International Biography, Men of Achievement, Who's Who of Intellectuals, Dictionary of Distinguished Americans, Who's Who in the World. I dare say if there were extraterrestrial life, there would be, the next phase would be the galaxy and the universe. You'd be there. Finally, I would like to welcome also Dr. Golany's wife, Esther Golany, who has a PhD in education. Well, the list goes on, and I really think I've said enough. Please join with me in welcoming Dr. Gideon Golany to present the design of earth-sheltered habitats in China. Now, I think we've got to put this, oh, I'm sorry, the wrong way around. Here we go. Oops. One here. Yeah, this is a present for you.
Well, thank you very much. I feel like a bride going to a wedding with all this. Thank you very, very much, Stan. I wonder if I came here to lecture or I came to meet Stan after 21 years, which we haven't seen each other. But in any case, I would like to thank Marvin, who made this possible for us. And I'm very delighted for this opportunity to be with you today. Do you hear me well? Those who are in the back, okay. I would like to talk about China, but I'm always sort of thrilled when I'm talking about China. And I feel it's a sort of my second home in a way. I was there for 8 visits, and every time I come there, I feel it's a very stimulating environment for architects and for engineers, and for urban designers, for engineers as well. What I'll be talking is from my personal experience for the last almost 5 years, spending around 1.5 years in China, almost being everywhere in China, from Tibet in the west and southwest to the very northeast in Harbin, and north in Mongolia, and the very south area of China. In those lectures, I have problem. I must confess a little bit. My problem is whether to give a scientific lecture or to give an easy kind of public lecture. And I always come with a synthesis of the two together. So you have to bear with me in this. But I would like to do it systematically as I can. I'll focus primarily and almost exclusively on the subject of cave dwellings. So there are many tempting subjects to talk about China, and I will try not to touch upon that. They are really very tempting. I gather that if I'll push the button here, which I have to know where is it, and to turn off the light. Right, thank you very much. China is almost the size of the United States. And the area which I'll be talking about is primarily the northern part of China, which I'm circling with the light here. But prior to that, I would like, as a point of introduction, for those who are not familiar with China and those who are familiar with China, I would like to explain a basic point. China is a multi-culture society. The Han is the dominant one in it, of course, but it's full of ethnic groups. But the most exciting is also the geographical regions of it. And I'm not going to explain these geographical regions, but I would like to explain some basic fundamental things. China is divided into two parts by what's so-called Qinling Mountains, which goes this way, all this area. Divide China to northern part, which is this part, excluding the northeastern part, of course, and the southern part of China. And typically, what's really typical to the north is being dry, or almost dry, entirely dry, almost dry, semi-dry in a way, and semi-humid here in a way. And being wet and warm in this area. So consequently, all the economy of this side is based on wheat and seeds and the like, and on irrigation with the Huanghe River. And all the economy of this side is primarily based on the rice, and again on irrigation, but on the rain primarily, but not exclusively. And the product is primarily vegetables and the like related things. So basically, the meeting ground between the two become the most active economically throughout the history of China, being the exchange between two economic regions. For those who are familiar with economy of regions and the characteristic, they must know that really being active as such, most of the capital cities of China were located here. This is as far as background. So let me focus on this area, which is the northern part of China. This is inner Mongolia, and this is outer Mongolia. This is out of China, of course. This is almost desert area in this area. So all this land is characterized by a soil called Loess soil, L-O-E-S-S, a German term which is used for the southern part of Germany. A special type of soil. You will see some of the map and their exact distribution later, which its nature is that it is very good for agriculture, which support the development of the early civilization here, of Chinese civilization. The cradle of it is here, actually, in the Huanghe River, in this soil of the Loess. But from our point of view, this soil is made of relatively soft soil, firm soil. You can cut and use the space inside that soil. And if it is not touching water, really it still holds itself firmly and very well. And that's the secret of the development of the cave dwelling within that area. So actually the distribution of the cave dwellings of 30 reserved number, 30 million, 40 non-reserved number million population, which live throughout this area, living below ground, living but not dead below ground. This is not a new phenomenon. It's a historical phenomenon which took place 2,000, 3,000 years BC, and it goes back to the early beginning of the civilization, of the Chinese civilization. Now let me try to change this. Please keep in mind the region, as I said, and we are going to, the distribution of the cave dwelling are in Shanxi province, Shaanxi province, Ningxia province, Ganzhou province, and Henan province in this area. These are the major distribution of the cave dwellings. This is not to say that you will not find cave dwellings nearby Beijing in this area or somewhere here, but there is almost no cave dwellings in this area, but there are usage of below ground in this area, specifically in Chongqing City, because it's made of rocks, hard rocks, and I'm not going to touch upon this one. This is really extraordinary outside the area. And I'm going to dwell in this region as a whole. Yan'an City, which we are going to touch upon, is located somewhere here. And I'll show you a few slides of Yan'an City, because the long march of Chairman Mao with 11,500 kilometers all the way, escaping from the Japanese and the Kuomintang, went all the way this way to Yan'an City, to this area, because he was able to use the cave dwellings and elaborate in those cave dwellings and dig much of them there in that area to avoid the attack of the Japanese in 1936, where he held his headquarters later. It's working. Okay, this is showing the Neolithic settlements which were developed around 3,000 years, 2,500 years BC, and their distribution. This is the cradle of the Chinese civilization. The Paleolithic one was developed here also. This is not to say there were not some outside this area, but this is the major one, which the Neolithic, the early villages characterizing the Neolithic period, which were developed here. These are different settlements which were here. The most early one were found in the Wei River right here, which is leading to the Huanghe River. And most of them lived in the cave dwellings in this area, which were discovered. So I will show some slides of that. This is a model of a village, Bampu village, exactly in the site where Wei River located. These are semi below ground as a point of departure. I want to show the settlements. All these are housing or huts which are partly below ground, partly above ground, circumferences by a ditch surrounding it. Now it is restored near Xi'an City, and it was discovered a few decades ago. Topographically, the area is a plateau, actually, of all this soil. There are mountains in this region, as well in the south with Qingling Mountain, and continue this way all the way almost to Shanghai area. This is Shaanxi, and this is Shaanxi, or the other way around. It's always difficult to have me spell it out, pronounce it out properly. But anyhow, this is the major plateau, and you will see the major density of the cave dwellings are really here. And the more you go to the east and the southeast, the more you see of those cave dwellings, which we are going to look into them later. The list soil, there are four types which are differentiations by a quarterly geological formations. The soft one is the upper one, Q4, and as you go down is the harder one. Most of the cave dwellings are located in the soft layer, and some of them in the second layer. Very few are located in this layer, which are located in this area and south in this area of Henan. Almost you don't see cave dwellings beyond this area of the list distribution of the list soil of China. The nature of the list soil is very unique. It developed a certain landscape which is characterizing this area. It so happened I grew up in the southern part of Israel where another list soil exists, and this is the origin of my vision and stimulation and interest in the Chinese, in the cave dwellings and below ground usage environment. Anyhow, usually the erosion is vertical erosion and not horizontal erosion. In other words, it's a subject to have a cavity once the soil is eroded or the water is penetrated into the soil, and those cavities is subject to create the collapse of the cave dwelling ceiling, as we'll see that at a later time. Anyhow, these are different forms, like this form is a bridge, a hole, a sinkhole, which create the cavity, a cliff, and those other forms, including dunes, sometimes like this one, or sometimes the other feature, which you see that. But in most cases, the overall, or at least the beginning, before the vertical erosion take place, the overall is a plateau and a flat kind of a form. This is the further development and this early development of this erosion. It's important to know about this characteristic because we'll see later, and you will raise a few questions related to this. I'm trying to be in the scientific side until now, and a few more slides until we get the more pleasuring side. And I didn't mean that scientific is not pleasuring also. Anyhow, as you see it here, Q4 is the places where most of the cave dwellings are located, and many of them are located really, as we'll see later, there are two types, just to brief you on this. There are the pit cave dwellings, as I classify them, and there is the cliff cave dwelling. This is just one type of the cliff cave dwelling, which is actually, it's semi-pit type cave dwelling, but it's not really purely cliff dwelling as I so define them. Anyhow, overlooking the lowland, but I wanted to show that in relation with those layers, stratification of the list soil itself. Almost there is no rocks or stones within this soil. Then the natives are very much aware of the differentiation by instinct and by life experience, which pass from one generation to another. They are very much aware of this differentiation in the geological Q4 or Q1 or Q3 and so forth. This is an aerial photograph which I sneaked illegally when I was flying from Lanzhou City to the eastern side. And I want you to see what I tried to show in the drawing before. That's why I gave you that drawing. It's one cave dwelling, semi-pit, semi-cliff type, another one, third one, fourth, and so forth. Actually, there is much wisdom in this location. Today, we're talking about the location of cities and location of housing and so forth. And I was trying to explain being located in the top of the mountain, it's cooler than being located down. This is one example of it. But the Chinese haven't located here because of that. They were located here because it's between two geographical regions, anyway, two types of soil. This is cultivated for wheat, and this is for plants, for trees, for fruits and alike. Two different a geographical product of two different regions in a way. And I think it's a very good view. Marvin hasn't seen that when we were in Virginia. I promised him there will be new slides in a way. This is a map which have taken me months to collect the information. And what I tried to show you here, it's the density of the distribution of the cave dwelling in the 4 provinces, Shanxi, Ningxia, and Gansu and Henan, or part of Henan right here. The high concentration is in the core of the plateau. This eroded plateau actually right now, but what's left from this list plateau. And as you go east, the density a little bit increase here, and as you go west, the density and distribution decrease here. Just give you a general view of this. In the 5 provinces, the population who live below ground constitute between 20% to 25%. So actually, they constitute out of 200 million which live in those 5 provinces, they constitute, if we take the optimal number, 40 million, or the less number, which is 30 million. It's very hard to estimate precisely the number of this population. Yan'an City. It's located within a narrow valley, as you see it here. Primarily, the cave dwellings where Chairman Mao used are located primarily here in this area, and in this area as well. My hotel was here. It was walking distance from those cave dwellings. So I think I'm going to show you where he had his first headquarters. The research which I conducted really covered 12 cave dwellings, which were a prototype. I have to visit all the 5 provinces extensively and intensively in order to select those prototype houses. I'm not going to show you all the 12, but I'll show you one of them, and I'll show you the temperature measurement and the result of that as we see it there. Most of the cave dwellings here are cliff cave dwellings. One of the 12 was here, somewhere here, and the other one was way above, right in the area. The one which I will be showing you is really, at a later time, will be right here. Let me show you a few slides about those cave dwellings, cliff-type cave dwellings. This is a picture taken from pagoda on one of the hills located in the eastern part of Yan'an city. The width of this valley is around half a mile, in some places even a quarter of a mile when you go further up stream here. And I would like to draw your attention to all cave dwellings here. 60% of the population which live in this city are living below ground. 92% of the population who live in the region, of the whole region of Yan'an city, are living below ground. So just imagine, these are the very few houses or buildings, industries, governmental offices and the like, which are located along the shore, the narrow strip of the valley right here. The city extends much further beyond that line. Excuse me. This is a view closer, a view to the cliff dwellings here, the narrow strip which is right here between this line and this whole area of cave dwellings really belong. Some of them are above ground, as you may notice this one, imitating architecturally this type, which is built here, which is below ground. We'll come to the point why, and the explanation why below ground and not any other way. There are many reasons of that, but I prefer to talk about it at a later time. This is dormitory of the Yan'an University of Yan'an, and I wonder how our students like this. From far distance look very beautiful architecturally. Part of it is semi-below ground, part of it is above ground, but when you get close to it, I think it doesn't look, kept in a good shape. But that's a culture of style of living, and I don't blame the Chinese under those circumstances. This is another view, entirely different one in Yan'an city. I would like you to notice the architecture style above ground, which is following the architecture style which is below ground in this area, and the other one. This is again taken from that pagoda, but entirely in different direction. And this is one of the beautiful slides which I really like because it does represent a combination of many things. I would like you to notice them, please. Number one is the part in which is above ground, but yet it's why I call it earth-sheltered habitat, which they use the upper part for agriculture. And this is one of the reasons why living below ground and not above ground. So you can use the earth, the soil twice, living below ground and agriculture above ground. At the same time, I would like you to notice this one type, which is entirely below ground, and the cliff type, okay? Or this one, which is earth-sheltered versus the others, which are entirely below ground. So there is a combination of the two, and there is difficulty to define really if all the 40 million living in this type or living in that type, which I tried to explain to you on the cliff type. One of the greatest advantages of being on the cliff, and I would like to use to see, and I'm preaching for that when I talk today with other students about using the slopes for development of city rather than using the valley or the plain. I thought that this could be combined with the usage of below ground as well, using the slope. And one of the great advantages here, you have the threat of flood, and you have an open view to the valley and a good ventilation, and you have much privacy, but yet you are in the urban surrounding area as well. This is another view, again, from that pagoda to entirely different direction. I would like you to notice the below ground one, the patio, I call it earth-sheltered one, and then the patio, which is related to this building, and so forth. Again, this one, and again, this one. It repeated itself almost everywhere, all the way. So this agriculture could not have been used, this soil could not have been used for agriculture like this one, but this one could be used for agriculture, so this one could be used for cliff dwelling. I would like to say that in spite of the fact that some of the young generation are abandoning or leaving the cave dwelling usage, there's still the move there is still a growing movement in China for the usage of the below ground. This is one of the villages near Taiyuan city, not Taiwan, the island, Taiyuan city in Shanxi province, one of the old villages actually, and you can see the beauty of this architectural integration within the surrounding area, although this is one of the few cases in which stone is available in the area, because Q1 or Q2 revealed, and there is stone there. The depth of the list is ranging between 50 meters, every meter is 3 feet. You make the calculation, not me. I'm metric mind oriented, and between 50 meters and 200 meters depth, that much soil. Now, there are two types of list soil, one which is created by water, and the other one created by aeolian, by wind. This, most scholars do agree that most of this list soil type was created by wind movement. That's actually aeolian, having from the desert area carried the dust and deposit in this area. Similarly, we think the one in the southern part of Israel, but I think different than the list soil, which is located in Illinois, which is, I think it was created by water, actually. There are only 5 areas in the world in which you have really a large piece of soil, which is list soil. This is another view, which is fascinating, really, used in a terraced form, and it's quite beautifully integrated within the surrounding area. Part of this is a school, I think, if I recall right, part of it is living area, and looking over the valley or the plain, which is in the front of it. I wonder, what do you think about this alley, which is entirely below ground, yet it is open to the sky, and all those what you see here are entrances. It's very hard to see it, entrances to dwellings, which are on the level of this alley, actually. I like to present, some of you would notice that in many of my books, I like to present many alternatives. So the reader will get overall a view of the variety of models and cases. And I would like to leave this for half a minute or so longer to have you, without going through this and explain each one of it. I think it's self-explanatory, cliff type, yet still cliff type here, and pit type. This is flat area almost. These are real, not a theoretical model. I have 4,000 slides from which I selected those slides which are applicable here, and I made the drawings out of it, and I put them together in this kind of form. These are different villages, and not only cities, as I tried to explain in Yan'an city, but majority of the cave dwellers are living below ground. I would like you to notice the alley here, along this one. It's well organized in orderly manner. It sounds like a prairie land kind of community, which was actually. You know, I think some of you have seen this in Radowski, or this one in Radowski, Architecture Without Architects book, which is quite similar. It's not taken from there. But I would like you to see this one to notice, which is quite different, and this one is also different from the other. And this is, I think, is very beautiful, but I would like my intention to show you here primarily the entrance. This is more details than the one which I showed you before. The pit is really a big hall, as you see it here. I would say every meter is multiplied by 3, it makes it feet. So you have 8 meters here and maybe 7 meters here. The depth is between 8 and 10 meters. They figured actually, and without going through all the scientific explanation about soil behavior and heat gain and heat loss, within the soil itself, I just want to explain one basic thing. The deeper you go into the ground, the more stable the temperature is, and the higher you go closer to the surface, then the fluctuation of seasonal temperature fluctuation is greater. So if you go to the depth of 10 meters, the soil is constantly, around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So we know actually the behavior of the soil, but every soil has a different depth, but it's more or less 10 or to 11 meters. And the Chinese, surprisingly, have done similarly to what the Berber in southern Tunisia have done, 8 to 10 meters depth. And the size which I found in Tunisia in the cave dwellings there is quite similar to the size. Dimensions are quite similar to the one in China as well. So it sounds like 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they have a joint conference somewhere in between in the Pacific maybe, and they got together and decide what are dimensions of the cave dwellings and so forth. But in any case, it was amazing me after finishing this research in Tunisia and then in China to find this similarity. These are cliff-type cave dwelling, but it's also combined with, you see, it's a cliff one side, and then there's a wall here built of the list soil as well. Yeah. I want to show you a village, how a village looks like, built of terrace in a way. And you see this is one terrace all the way, one layer, and then it goes another one here all the way, and then a third terrace all the way. It's kind of linear form, looking over the valley, and it's all agricultural land behind, also agricultural land. This is just the pattern. I thought I should show you this kind of form. This is the process of digging the cave dwellings. First, you create a cliff, and you create a terrace. You take the soil from this cliff, from this triangle, and you put it here, so you create the terrace. And this is the second stage. And then you start digging here. I'll show you slides of people digging later. You will understand it better. And then you dig inside. Just cut and use. If you would like to, and if you have a stone in the surrounding area, you can cover it with stone. Some people do cover the inner part with the bricks, and looks very beautiful. And some of them cover it with the newspaper, so the dust will not fall in the room and litter the beds and so forth. They are very smart. The Chinese, so-called the Jews of the Far East, in a way. This is a self-compliment, also, being Jewish. Anyhow, this is the third stage, and then they cover the front part with this, more or less, most of them, the same pattern. These are made of wood, as we'll see it later. We'll see more of details of this one, and the facade, and covered from the inside with rice paper. which is like a milky paper. So it gets the light to go inside, but avoid wind and the like. It's too expensive to use the glass, actually. And this is the inside part of the room. Some of them do cover this part up to this level, 1.5 meter, with the bricks. Some of them don't, actually. This is the way they dig. It takes 3 days for 2 laborers to work. And as you see, it's a simple tools. So it's low technology, actually. You don't need much. You don't need much of a skill, actually. Every farmer could do that. And you have many days which you are not working in agriculture, so you can dig inside. Quite often happen through the wars between one state inside China and the other state, and there were many of those throughout the history. This was a mean for housing the soldiers, actually. The soldiers dig into the cliff. Luoyang city, for example, which was the capital, the eastern capital of China, for quite a long time, the 10th century and 14th century, the emperor who have 1 million soldiers, you have to house them somewhere, and they dig around in the surrounding area, building those cliffs. This was done. This is another stage, of digging. So actually, the price of below ground house is 50% of the same equivalent size of a house above ground. So actually, it's an economic matter. It's cheaper, it's easier, it requires low technology, and does not require a building materials. If I'll tell you, how can you build a building which doesn't require building materials, as an architect, you will look at me as I am crazy or what. That's exactly the case here. There is no need for almost any building materials, except the front part wood, and if you want, you can, the old one wasn't using wood at all. In China, there is very little, if any, wood left, and forest, not many of them left, except in very northeastern part of China. This is a common patio, which is a very few cases, not very common, a huge patio, and this belonged to one family, where this patio, a continuation of it, belonged to another family, and this belonged to another family. Usually those pits or cliff, which you have seen before, belong to one family. I just want to show you another type which was developed there. This is school, which is beautifully built, all below ground, and you see the elaboration here to get much more light. The depth of a unit like this could be unextendable. I mean, extendable to as deep as you want. I would say the depth of light penetration or sun penetration in the winter, where the sun angle will be low, in that latitude will be up to 6 to 7 meters deep of the sunshine. Light could go 2 meters further or so. But unless used as a storage area, people don't go in more than that depth of 8 meters, 9 meters. The width of it is determined by the strength of the soil. It ranges between 2.5 meters to a maximum of 3 or 3.2 meters. And the height between the lowest part and this part, this is exceptional here. I think these are 2 floors actually, is usually 2.5 meters. So these are dimensions which are really determined by the characteristics of the soil itself, and you cannot bypass it in any way. I want to show you here 3 types or 4 types here, or maybe 5 types. The pit one, with those dimensions which I was telling you about. Usually you must retain between this point of the ceiling and the upper part of the level of the surface here, 3 to 3.5 meters. If you get below that, then there is danger of collapse, because the water penetration, which goes vertically can create cavities and go down, collapse everything down. The other type is the cliff, literally terraced form. You dig inside, you build a terrace, and you go to the second level and so forth, to the fourth level and so forth. These are earth-sheltered habitat. It's above ground, but yet it's covered with earth, and to this level is covered with stone also if they are found in the surrounding area, or bricks. But these are semi-below ground, which means part of it below ground, part of it above ground. And this one, a combination actually of above ground, as you see those buildings, and below ground, which you see the cross-section, which is behind it in a way. So there are all varieties of this. When we are talking about cave dwellings, we are talking about this one, and this one, and this one as well, counting those which are below ground. We are not mentioning this one. We are not. It wasn't my research interest to deal with those two types. In terms of classification, I would say they are generally the cliff one and the pit one. You break it down to gullies, which are this type, and this is the plan of it. This is the perspective of it. And you say the edge one, which you have seen from aerial photograph, which I show you. These are different types, and again, the plan and the cross-section perspective. And then there is edge of the slope with the side of one cliff, like this one. I would like it's sort of classification which I come with, and middle of the slope, which you have seen it previously also, and then the pit one, which is almost total one. I want to show you, which I started talking about it, but I don't know why I did not continue with it. So the entrance, in which you go by stairways, and this is sliding entrance, differ from this one. This is for the animals, and this is for a human being, and you go down through this way to this side. Okay. Usually the side which is facing south is used by the elderly people. They have respect to the elderly. They're quite different than the way we deal with the elderly people. That's tradition in China. Then coming in turn, the younger one live in this side facing west, or this side facing east. The one which you don't see it here, but you just imagine it with this side, is where the animals are hosted, are living, or they use it for a storage area. These are all different forms, which partly I did explain it to you before, and partly I did not explain it to you. This complex could be of one extended family, but you see it's made of two units. The entrance is one unit of the patio, another unit here. And look at this one. Please note that one, which I tried to explain to you before, which is similar to here, but slightly different. There is much similarity in this, all this, and there is quite differentiation in all these groups. I tried to group them in a way to make it a little bit easy for understanding. I tried to find out the pattern here. These are the 12 which I researched throughout all the 5 provinces which I mentioned before. All the 6 are a cliff one, and for each one to select took me 1 week or 2 weeks to go around the area, take photographs, make measurements, to pick the right one which is representing a certain type. And all these are pit type of cave dwellings, which are also scattered within those five regions. I will be showing you at a later time a little bit details of this one, as you see it here. And this one was in Yan'an and along the valley, and this one was a little bit away from Yan'an, when I mentioned that to you. That's all one family, single family kind of houses. This is, I think, it's one of the beautiful slides which I have. It's really show beautifully the integration of those. No harm to the environment, almost no harm to the environment, I would say. It's very little effect on the environment, still facing south or southeast or southwest, receiving much of the sunshine, much of the light. This is very beautiful as well. But here it's different. That one was purely on the cliff, while this one, they have some some agriculture here, which was anyhow agriculture in the past. There is no ventilation in the cave dwellings because of a variety of reasons, for security, safety, against erosions. Once you make a hole like this one here, it is subject to vertical erosion, which goes down all the way, unless you really take care of it. So in most of them, this is exceptional, actually, ventilation. And this is actually for smoke rather than for ventilation. So the majority do not have ventilation. I try to suggest for them some solutions for that, and we run some experimentation. I think I'll show it to you later. This is purely for agriculture. The roofs, earth sheltered, actually. It's experimentation which is done by the Architecture Society of China. They have appointed a committee to study the whole complex of this below ground space usage. And now they discover they have a wealth of information, and they are moving fast but steadily toward the usage of below ground, not necessarily for dwellings. I'll come to that later, but they are running much of experimentation. This is another type in Henan region, in southeastern part of that region. The depth of this one from here to here was around 7 meters, and from here to the other surface, which is used for agriculture, to the plateau at the top, another 10 meters. So actually there was 17 meters almost between this level and that level. The guy who was living in it thought, and he's very smart actually, he has a problem, a serious one, but he could not define the problem. But finally he picked, the problem was there is no circulation of air because of the extreme depth here. And he tried to dig a hole from this room to all the way around to the other side of the cliff. There is a cliff on the other side looking over a lake on the other side. So in order to create circulation of air, but he was not able to create that circulation of air. And the architects in the surrounding area was so happy with this idea, and they were bringing every visitor to there. I took it as a case study. I measured the temperature. The worst among the 12 cave dwellings which I investigated, the temperature rise here at between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, the highest among all the cave dwellings because of that development which happened, the depth of this one. I'm not trying to criticize architects, but quite often we looked into things very superficially. All this climatic, it's somebody else's business, not me. But all the art is our interest and so forth. So we were in different opinion and tried to prove it for them. But finally they agreed that really there is a very serious problem here, which wasn't solved here. You remember that L-form house, which I tried to show you? One side, it was way into the cliff entirely. The other side is earth sheltered and covered by agriculture here. I tried to measure the temperature in one of the rooms here, which is entirely below ground, and measure the temperature in one of the rooms here, 24 hours. I measured the temperature, the dry bulb temperature and the wet bulb temperature, 24 hours on the hour, in the winter time and in the summer time, so I can compare and make my own analysis of that. I came with 720 graphs, and I'm not going to show you all those. Neither in my books will not include those. I selected only a few in that. But anyhow, I have to go through all the process in order to make my own analysis through the computer. There is some reasonable differentiation in the fluctuation of temperature between the room which is earth sheltered and between the room which is in the cliff, which pointed out that actually there is differentiation in behavior of the temperature within the soil itself. This is another one, which is again the agriculture above, cultivated. This is not easy, it's quite dangerous. You see the thickness of the soil, it's almost 6 meters between the ceiling here and the surface here. If it would have been 3 meters, as usually the case, the they could not have developed agriculture above it. But for those who have only 3 meters thickness, they used above ground either for storage or for any other usage but not for agriculture. But those who do use it for agriculture, they need more than 3 meters between this point of the ceiling and the surface of the soil above it. This is a very simple how 30 years ago, let's say, I've used it. There are almost no building materials here. Actually, all the front part is made of less soil, not even bricks, just ramped soil, and very few wood here, if any, and the door, which made of simple, kind of wood. But later, for the last 20 years or 30 years, they improved. The standard of living is changed. I want to show you this because this is built in a gully or gilly, G-U-L-L-E-Y, which is a canyon type. I couldn't take the picture from far distance. This is as much far as I can go and still catch 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there is one above it, at least in this part, which is not shown here. And the stairways goes from here, actually, to this terrace. There is almost no terrace here. You see the stairways, which goes all the way up. It is fascinating, and hundreds upon hundreds of homes I've seen all along the canyon living in this way. This is just one section of it, This is school built not far from Xi'an City. This was nearby. It's a commune area, and they built the school in a very extremely soft soil without knowing that it's very soft. It didn't last more than 5 to 6 years, and then they abandoned it. The school didn't exist anymore because it could not hold itself, the soil. Okay, now we're getting to some other aspect which I haven't discussed it with you yet. If you notice, I mentioned below ground cave dwellings, and I use the term below ground space usage. These are 2 different terms. And what I meant actually with the second term is the variety of usage from hospital, modern one, to shelters, to restaurants, to shopping centers, modern one, to hotels, and you name it. You'll see a few of those slides later. One of the most exciting things which happened to me, and I wouldn't go through all the story, which is I used to tell that story in a very exciting way because I got it in even more exciting kind of process when I insisted that the Chinese government, I want them to show me the below ground space in Beijing, Peking of China, because somebody, it was slip of his mouth, and she told me that 50% of Beijing is below ground. And I picked that point and I decided to press them to show me where they are. It took 3 years to convince them that I am really not a spy. I'm a scientist and I'm doing, because every time I came, I gave them a copy of my new book or whatever. It cost me a little bit money sometimes, but I like them very much, really. So finally, when I told them, if you are not going to do it, I'm not going to help students coming to the United States, through my program in a way of joking, in a way. But they took me there, and we went to one of the most high, densely populated commercial streets, and we went to one of the shopping centers, and they talked with the girl who was standing behind the counter to move, asked her to move. They pushed the button, all the floor moved aside, and we went down, the light turned on, and we went down. He pushed the button again downstairs, and the floor went back to wherever it was. And all the store, the shopping center was full of Chinese seeing all this, but they don't talk about it in a way. In the 60s, I'll tell you what's happened inside later. In the 60s, China was threatened by atomic attack by the Russian. If some of you could remember that, maybe the young generation would remember this. And China was trying to prepare themselves, the Chinese, for defense. And they really literally, they built a huge network below ground in Beijing, and partly in Chongqing, and very partly in Shanghai, because Shanghai has a problem with water table, high water table. In any case, now they figured actually they have not been using this space all the time, and they now converting most of those spaces to hotels for Chinese only, and for restaurants, for shopping centers, for all kinds of things, you name it. This is just one of the design which was published in one of the books, and I translated, not me, I hired people to translate books for me from Chinese to English to know what the Chinese have written about this. And it doesn't mention really where it is, but it does mention the design of those units, you know. So they laid me in that unit, which I start telling you about, and they took me to one of the rooms. I think I'm coming into that. This is the tunnel, which we went through after we went through the stairways. At the end of this tunnel, it was around 60, 70 yards length. At the end of it here, went through a kind of a lobby, and I saw pictures there of almost many of the prototype below ground space which are used in Beijing, which I knew about it, mushroom raising and hospitals and industries and the like. And I pulled the guy who was escorting me. I say, Mr. Young, would you please come and see those pictures? It's written in Chinese. And I told him what it is. He said, how can you know? I said, you know. He said, I don't know. And I knew it is connected outside, 3 kilometers outside of Beijing, far away, in order to evacuate the people in case of attack. And I said, how many people you could accommodate in all this network in all Beijing? He said, 5 million people out of 9 million people. And that was almost exactly the percentage which that woman, the high officer, gave me when she said 50% of Beijing is below ground. She said, Dr. Golany, you don't know what we did below ground here. You could not imagine what it is. So this is a hotel, actually, Chinese pattern hotel in China, in Beijing. This is European, also below ground, European type. It's 1 room, 1 or 2 beds only, with reasonable facilities below ground for Chinese to live in. I don't think they let the European people to see it. This is a huge below ground space in Hangzhou city, the West Lake City. For those who were there, one of the most beautiful cities in China, where the emperor used to go there. Anyhow, now there are tunnels in the mountains there, and this is out of the list area. And this is used now for dancing and for gathering of young people there. There are some other usage also as well, like Buddhist temples, as this one is, or tombs. This is the room which they took me there, actually, and where the girl is standing there. That's actually where I was sitting on this chair, and this is the curtain which they moved it, and through the remote control, he showed me the full map of where all this network, different type of land uses is located. This is for a conference room. I would rather for whatever that conference. We ended actually, when we finished visiting this tunnel, 8 meters level below ground, 15 meters another level below ground, and 30 meters at the same network. We ended finally getting through a shopping center somewhere at the other end. I couldn't believe it. All the shopping center was below ground. And I didn't know how he get me there, actually. I said, am I still below ground? He said, yes, you are still below ground. When we left the shopping center, we left with a dead-end kind of street, which you don't know, actually, there is shopping center here, and that become to be used for a tourist, actually. This is a tomb, Ming tombs, not far from Beijing, not for those who go to the Great Wall, they could see that, the tomb. It's beautifully articulated and designed, and the depth is around, I think, 20 meters below ground. It's beautiful, beautiful inside. And that's why I was lucky with this slide. Then there is another usage of storaging of food below ground, grain, vegetables, fruits, and the like. The length of this tunnel is 40 meters, which is 120 feet, at least, I would say. At the end of it, if you can notice, there is a beginning of a shaft which goes all the way up. And I was lucky that it was empty, so I can take the picture of this. I mapped it. And of course, I mapped all the 12 buildings and many other buildings as well. I mapped this one, and they have all the scale of it. This is a hospital in Shanghai, a modern one below ground. Well, it is above ground 7 floors, but there is below ground 1 floor, and the 2 operation room for surgery, they located below ground. I did survey the temperature, again, the winter and the summer, and I interviewed the doctors there and so forth. And I found, amazingly, something which I think it's very important discovery, actually, that through the interview, the doctors told me that they found, accidentally, that below ground recreation or recovery of the clients, it takes 20% less time than it would be above ground. And this is absolutely, it's an economic matter. It's not only other matter of design and space and the like. In other words, that after the surgery, if it is outside, external surgery, not internal surgery, because of the stability of the temperature, 24 hours, and the synchronization of that, the stability of the humidity as well. The combination of the two speed the healing of the wound, which is an external one. So you save 20% to 25% of the time instead of spending it above ground. That was very important. Another thing is, which was used historically, and Loyang City, as we'll see that later in the map, was one of the leading one, is usage of below ground grain or granary for storaging grain. Now, at the 14th century, they used a large number of them, and then they abandoned them because of war and attack and so forth. They discovered them recently, 450 of them, and they discovered still some of them are full of grain. 50% of grain after 500 years is still in a good condition. The other 50% is in decay kind of condition. And the way they used it is very fascinating. They mortar the site. This is just one of those holes inside, and then they cover it with wood and with a certain type of oil, and they cover it with earth also. And I wouldn't go through the details because it's readable and self-explanatory. I want to show you the plan of the city. This is just section of the city, actually. I want to draw your attention to the scale here. This is 100 meters, 300 feet of this scale. And these are around, there is 450 of them here. And those which are dotted is unexcavated. This one, the dotted, is excavated, and you see much of them are really excavated. This is part of Loyang, ancient Loyang city. The emperor building was here, right here, and the nobles lives here, so they bound this area from both sides, and the common people lived in this area here. This is, again, a variety of design of the facade, and I think it's self-explanatory. These are different regions. One could be 1,000 or 2,000 kilometers from each other because of different culture or subcultures, I would say, although most of them are one ethnic group, almost dominantly Han ethnic group. I think it's self-explanatory. I don't have to explain it to you. These are windows in more details, and I think it's fascinating. This is custom-made windows, of course, not Anderson windows. And it's without the glasses here, and it's covered with paper, rice paper, milky paper, and they are really very, very beautiful. This is an entrance, which I tried to show you before, the sliding for the animal, and then for the human being, and this pit. And these are different entrances. It's the one type which I showed you before. There's another type. Usually in the Chinese habit, when you have an entrance, this is the entrance, they block the view from the entrance toward the inner side of the house by building a wall. That's common all over China, not only in the cave dwellings, but also in above ground housing as well. That's the kind of design. And you can see it here in a way. The wall is almost vanished. Part of it is still here, to obstruct the view to the inside of the house. This is just one picture of well-to-do, I would say, house. And you can see furniture of the farmer is a bicycle, and heated bed. I'll show you later about it. I'll talk about it later. And beautiful, beautiful closets, all kinds of poems, and quite often pictures around. Very beautiful. Red colors and blue colors are dominant in China usually, and I love both of them, and I assume you like it. This is a connection between one room in one side and the other room in this side. And you can see the width which is left to hold this room and to hold the other room ceiling. The connection is around 3 meters or 3.5 meters as well. So this is standard dimensions in a way. This is a bedroom, heated bedroom. You don't need heated blanket, electric blanket. The way it operates, they take the fire, the charcoal from the oven after finish the cooking, and they put it here. And this all built from bricks, and even this part from large bricks. And only the wood is the frame which is surrounding this one. You can see a boy, really 16 years old or so, can lay down all the way from, please notice this wallpaper, coverage here, which is, I think it's very smart. We may not like it, but that's the practicality of life. You see the paper here, the rice paper, milky sort of paper. This is not well-to-do house. Of course, this is another heated bed. This is the entrance. This is a good friend of mine who is running experimentation in some of the cave dwellings, and he was delighted to talk with somebody who was really doing the same thing as he is trying to do also. And Chinese love pictures of themselves. You exchange pictures with them. Give you your picture, I'll give you my picture. And this is part of their culture in a way. You remember that L-shaped house, which I tried to show you the picture of it in a way. Part of it is fully in the cliff, and part of it is earth sheltered, which is covered by earth in a way. This is an extended family. It's all looking over the valley. The valley is right here. There is a river here. It's a wide valley of 3 miles. It's beautiful, light, and he's very smart. He really did it in a way. This is facing southwest. This is facing southeast. And the angle is here 90 degrees. And there is no better orientation than the way he did it, actually. You have much of the light afternoon here, and you have much of the light of the morning on this one as well. Much of the sunshine, I meant to say. But he has the light most of the daytime in both of them, actually. But yet, there was differentiation in temperature in this one, which I measured, in this one, which was similar to each other, to compare with this one, which was earth shelter, in a way. I will go to that. I think this is the plan of that building. And I want you to notice this. This is the inner part. This is storage area, of course. The temperature was measured here. Number 1, temperature. Number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 is right here. That's the outside. Usually I measure temperature inside, and then outside in the patio, and the patio is closed. I measure temperature outside as well, entirely outside. It was a problem to be 24 hours in a building in which they live. There were an old woman here, and there were a couple living here also. So at the night, they didn't allow me to measure temperature. My Chinese assistant to do so, and they agreed to that. And they were really very nice with me and very generous with me. I was supported by the government, and I was in areas which I was the first white man to be seen in that area. I want to show you one of the 5 of the 720 graphs. This is site 1, if you remember, of that building. It's right here, okay? The site 2 is right here. And you see, this is the summer temperature, and this is the winter temperature. It's very slight differentiation. Fluctuation is very minimal, and this is very comfort temperature. This is in the winter, and this summertime. It's cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And this site 2, which is this one, I would like you to notice site 3, which is this one. There is more fluctuation, and the temperature is higher here, actually, in site 3, as well in site 4, which I'm not showing you here because I couldn't put too much sites here. And this is all the sites together, which are combined. This is just, I'll skip this one also without going through this. And this is the relative humidity, I think. No, this temperature. Sorry, I tried to find some solutions for the light problem which they have. And I come with some. It's a part of larger variety, and I'm not going to show you the other, in which I call this one a Roman pattern, because I found in Bulla Regia, a Roman city, in which they developed below ground housing. They took the peristyle and they put it down below ground. What's that? I think I disconnect. Do you still hear me there? At the back? Okay. In Bulla Regia, in northern Tunis, my research was primarily in the southern part of Tunis. But I discovered there is a city in the northern part built by the Roman. They solved the problem of light this way. Whether it's sliding there, this way. But anyhow, I have to run. One other problem is that some of the houses or the cave dwellings are overcrowded by vegetation and by evapotranspiration, that evaporation through the leaves, evapotranspiration, they increase the humidity in the summertime. And I should have mentioned that the summer is the rain season, and so the summer is the hot season as well. And the combination of rain with the high temperature, it's really almost intolerable. Adding to this, the fact that when you have trees, which have the advantages of shadowing, but have the disadvantages of producing higher humidity in the area, I think it's creating a very serious problem. It's just one of those, how the trees really crowded and avoid any ventilation and circulation of the air inside it.
Uh, Basically, I tried to suggest for him, and we built the tunnel, as you may see it later, I think I put that on. I tried to suggest the development of a shaft in which you direct the air through the shaft with a full control system which is directed by rotating the catcher, wind catcher. It goes inside the room and goes up here the other way. The reason why the direction will take place this way, I know some architects were challenging me whether this is right or not, but my experimentation proved it is right. There is an intense heat here, which is taking place. If I close all this, always the air will go up. Because in spite of the fact there is no circulation, assuming that this does not zip, the air will go up, there is some air will go down to this, the threshold on this side, because the heat is intense here between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock afternoon. Having that in mind, if I'll have the shaft here, then obviously the intense heat here will sap the air through this shaft, through the window here, to here, and create air circulation here. This air circulation is needed because there is condensation here, because this is very cold in the summertime, cool and not very cold, cool in the summertime, and create, because of the high humidity here, it creates condensation. In order to release that condensation, and in order also to increase the temperature in this room, I have to ventilate the room and get this humidity outside. And my experimentation with the around there proved that I was right in this. Now we are trying to build up. We built this tunnel, built of bricks, almost 1 meter diameter here. As you see, that's the end of this shaft at the top. I'll show it to you in the picture. This is the interior part. This is the person who worked with me. He's the head of the China Research at that academy in Taiwan City, which is where we did that research nearby. And this is the entrance to that shaft. If you cannot see it, I built 3 openings here, like a door, like block of 1, 2, 3, because I want to run experimentation. What would be the ideal level where the shaft actually begin or end, if you want to say so, where it should be this level or this level. I found this is the best one. It should be. I'd like to show you the shaft from the outside. This is the level which is around 7 meters or so. This is the wind catcher rotating itself in a way, and it proved, as I said, proved to be very successful. I would like to draw your attention, without even go through this, the Eskimo house, which is based on similar concept in which use the below ground space. The Jerusalem walls, thick walls of 3 meters without going through the details of this one. Entirely different type of climate in which you have the wall sapping the humidity of the winter. It takes 1 season to get to inside. In the summertime, they receive that humidity, and the coolness is really provided in this space in summertime. The winter operates the other way around, because in the summertime it operates. Let me repeat again. The winter, the humidity, and the coolness penetrate with arrive here in the summertime. The summer it gets dry, and the dryness arrives to the room in the winter time. So in the winter, it's cool, it's warm, and in summertime it's cool. The basic concept is above ground house, and many of the houses in the old Jerusalem part is built this way, and the same concept applies with the less effectiveness on the below ground houses.
Can you speak into that?
Oh, really? Okay, I'll try to do my best. Do you hear me now? I would like to move now. No, I didn't finish. With your permission, 8 slides left. I was going to talk about this afternoon, but I decided to shift this one. And to close my talk today, with some conclusions. It has been all my work since I started with the students is to bring the vernacular experience, and vernacular by my definition, historical experience from thousands of years or recently 19th century, whatever, everywhere I did my research, to bring that experience, to conclude it, and to conclude the application of that experience to a modern design. Whole issue of my research in Tunis and in China was focused on one direction. What kind of lessons we can learn from all this vernacular, being a practical person, what kind of lessons we can learn to bring it to a modern design. And I would like to introduce one basic lesson, at least in its conceptual frame in our discussion here. And then I'll give you the floor to discuss it. My philosophy is that cities should not be built on the floor. I'm not talking about below ground now. I'm talking about cities in general, before I get back to below ground. The cities should not be built on flat area, on plain or in a valley, unless there is no other choice. But rather, if there is a choice, we should use the slope and leave the flat area, the valley, for view, for agriculture, for a better kind of environment, and turn it the other way around. This is an entirely different concept than the British. And the British inherited that, the opposite concept, the Australian, and so on, unfortunately. Okay? So I tried to take that idea. Most of my research in Arab villages in Israel and Jerusalem was focused on studying the slope usage and so forth. It's one concept. The second concept is to combine that slope usage with a compact form. This is one of the basic lessons which we can learn from the ancient civilization for entirely different reasons. For saving agricultural land, for having protection and safety, for being proximate to each other because of closeness and so forth. Compact form was introduced primarily in stressful climate regions. I would like to take that. Then I would like to combine that with earth-integrated space. And again, I would like to make it clear. I'm not preaching for a full below ground city. Not at all. For a variety of reasons, psychological reasons, and historical reasons, and behavioral reasons, so forth. I won't go through that right now. What I am preaching for is usage, the extensive usage of below ground space in our modern city. My calculations have led me to conclusion that 50% plus minus of any city almost is non-dwellings. A space which is used for restaurants, for theaters, for libraries, and you name it, shopping centers and the like. If I'll take only that space without any below ground dwelling, then that would be subtracted and would change the whole land use pattern, the whole system of transportation and utilities within our modern city. And we can do it. And it is less expensive than the cities which we are developing now. And I will prove it to you now very quickly, economically as well. I would like to move to the second slide after this concept here. I am not going to explain this. I made some analogy about the pros and cons of subterranean usage. First is you are, by using subterranean space, you are reducing the price of the land by 50% at least. So because you are using above ground and you are using below ground as well. You are having a better environment, temperature-wise, in the summertime and in the winter as well. You are saving energy, you are making least harm for the environment, and so on and so on. I can calculate, I can count those advantages, which I'm not going to do. But the research was done actually in that sense already. And then I did the same thing. Well, I wanted to list all the windowless environment, which we are able to count at least part of it in the cities which we are living in, and complete all this environment with all these spaces below ground. There are many universities now have libraries below ground. Pros and cons, I think this is of the below ground space. I'm sorry I mixed that with the previous one, the one before the previous one. And since I'm not getting details of this, pros and cons of the slope, I'm going to do it very quickly because we don't have time. I'll give you some time for questions. And I'm trying to make comparison here. Let me switch to the other one, and I will explain partly the previous table. I took 50 acres, and I ran experimentation. It looks very simple, but proved my theory and my point. I took 50 acres in flat area, another 50 acres in flat area, another 50 acres in slope, which is reasonable kind of slope. The first one, I designed them in the conventional slope type. I call it American model. Desert housing, around 192 units. And I took the same 192 units, and I built it in a compact form, no below ground, only compact form. Okay? I saved much space as an open space. I'll come back to this slide. I took the same 192 units, I designed them below ground and above ground, and a compact one, in a way. Okay? So the same one. I did not change the size of each unit at all. The same size. I did not change the standard of living. I just changed the way I put the housing, apart vertically, horizontally on the line. And 48 acres, 192 units, and 139 square meters, or 1,500 square feet. An average type of house. Let me show you what I came with the result. The conventional one, the first model. Second model, the third model. This is the table. And I won't go through this, but I would like to explain. I calculated the land uses, okay? 35 acres for living space, literally housing. Roads, 13 acres. Infrastructure, 28 miles infrastructure length, counting all utilities below and above ground, electricity wires, telephone wires, gas wires, roads, pipes of sewage, pipes of water supply, cable television, and you name it. I reached the 28 miles here. Now, to take the second one here, and I calculated traffic lights, number of traffic lights, street lights, traffic lights, 24. That's taxpayer money. Street lights, 153. Fire hydrant, street landscaping. I think that here, this model, in this model, please make the comparison. 6 versus 24. 76 versus 153. I took the length of utilities here, the infrastructure, 8 miles. No building below ground, only compact form here. Infrastructure, 7 miles or 8 miles versus 28 miles. The third model, okay, I think self-explanatory, I don't want to go through details here. The third model in which I combine compact supraterranean with subterranean. 38, 39 acres open space. No open space here. Roads and living space to compare with the other one. And the other one as well. And the utilities, the length of the utilities, 3.5 versus 28. So I think economically, I think I ended the lecture. The slides. Economically, the lesson is very clear, and I think socially we have great advantages in terms of bringing the city together and have people interact with each other much better. I know it's a trade-off. There is disadvantages and advantages in each one of those, models versus the above ground entirely the way we design our cities and so forth. I think I ended with this lecture. I'm sorry to rush very quickly at the last part of it, but Stan has taken part of my time already at the beginning, right? And I have taken part of my time too by presenting the last part also, but I thought it would disjustice to you just to show you slides and talk about cave dwelling without really getting to that point, which I really might concern. What is the lesson which we can learn from all those, Chinese experience? And I thought that the last 8 slides, and I'm sorry to do it very superficial, I hate to do it that way, because that part would have taken me 2 hours or so to explain it after you do that with my students. But thank you very much for listening to me. Before we get to questions and answers, I prepared some flyers of 2 types. One is about the recently published book of mine 2 months ago, which your library have ordered, and I think it will be arriving very shortly here. It's about Chinese, I always forget the names of my earth-centered dwellings in Tunisia. It's a product of research similar to the one which I produced in China. And the second one is the list of 18 books of my publications, which for those of you who are interested in the Chinese case, the last 3 books which I produced about China, 2 of them, and I'll give you a copy of this, 2 of them are in the press right now by the same Delaware University of Delaware Press, printing the 2 of them which are dealing with the dwellings, and the 3rd one still I'm negotiating with one university press for publication. Please help yourself to get a copy of either one before you do it today. I will entertain some questions. For clear questions, get a clear answer. Don't be shy. I'll try to do my best.
Because of the infrastructure is too big in that city.
Because what?
Because of the infrastructure, like the excavation, movement of land.
The cost, I think I mentioned that, of the cave dwelling unit to compare with the same size of cave dwelling unit, not cave, with same above ground house, Chinese standard, okay? Made of stone or bricks or whatever. The cost of below ground one is 50% than the above ground. So from the Chinese point of view, this is very practical matter. For non-Chinese also it's a practical matter as well. So that's a very determining factor here. And not to mention, obviously, the no need for building materials here, which is one of the very few, if any, type of architecture which you don't use building materials. Did I answer your question?
Perhaps the questions can be answered informally by coming and meeting Dr. Golany and also having a chance to take these flyers. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for the most fascinating talk. Good luck.
Pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.